Hey everyone. So this video is going to be the next part in our series that I'm doing with Sunny Pereira regarding mental illness and the handling of mental illness and mental disorders in the Church of Scientology, a group of people who believe that they have cornered the market on handling mental illness and mental difficulties that people have, or psychological problems people have, because that's what L.Ron Hubbard insisted that they had and said that he had figured out. But, you know, when it comes to this sort of thing, proof is in the pudding, and Scientology comes short time and again with how they go about dealing with people who have true psychological illnesses or disorders or problems. And as we've laid out in the earlier videos in this series, which is linked in the description section below to the playlist of all the videos in this series, we have covered how Scientology pretty wildly even misdefines what psychosis is, how they deal with these things in a very, sometimes very destructive fashion. And so now this video, what we're going to cover here is the nitty-gritty details of an action that is delivered in Scientology called the Introspection Rundown. And we've talked about this, we've gone over a little bit of the details of this, some of the history of this, but now we're going to get into how this is actually done. And we're going to get into real technical details of Scientology, which means we're going to go over some of the processes and procedures of Scientology auditing and explain how it works, why it is laid out the way that it is. And I hope you find this interesting. Because it is going to be very detailed. So without further ado, and of course to help me with this, as we've been doing with the earlier videos, here is Sunny Pereira. Hi Sunny, thanks for joining me for this.
Hi.
So, okay, and Sunny, for those who, if you're just jumping into this in this video, you've missed a lot, and I do suggest you look at the earlier videos in this series, but if you're just jumping in now, Sunny is a highly trained Scientology technical practitioner. She not only dealt with doing what they call auditing, which is Scientology counseling, but she oversaw the supervision of cases. When a person is getting auditing or counseling in Scientology, there is a one-on-one that goes on with an auditor, but what is done with the person is directed by a separate person who's called the case supervisor, who sits in a room and just goes over the case notes and directions and then tells the auditor what to do in the next session according to L.Ron Hubbard's instructions. Scientology consists of thousands of different processes and procedures that are run on people who are receiving auditing. They're called pre-clears, and the case supervisor is the ultimate director of the case, and that's what Sunny did for many, many years as a Scientologist and a Sea Org member as well. So she worked at the highest levels of Scientology.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so I thought what we would do is maybe first you had some recap you wanted to do on some of the material we've covered before, so go ahead and let's start with that.
Okay, the first thing is in the first video that we did, we discussed the mental illnesses and compared those to how they're thought of in Scientology. In regards to that, somebody who comes in with a diagnosed illness from a psychiatrist wouldn't be qualified to get treatment or counseling or sessions within Scientology. That's just our descriptions of those manifestations and how they would be addressed in Scientology. And then in the second video, we talked about the beginning steps of the introspection rundown, which is you know, if somebody has a psychotic break, how the isolation step is done, the medical procedures that need to be done, and what the muzzled steps were. The people watching the person have to be muzzled. There's no conversations at all with the person. The only person that talks to the person in that psychotic break is the auditor themselves, and then the case supervisor through some notes that we're going to discuss later in this video. Other than that, there is nobody that deals with that person until they're completed through the entirety of this rundown.
Right.
One of the first things I wanted to say, Scientology is very fond of labeling people giving them little descriptions. This is what you are and that's what you are, whether they say it to the person directly or not. They like to have labels on stuff because then you have that label and that describes everything about that person. That tells you that, it tells you the personality, if you will, of that person. Let's say they're a suppressive person, means, you know, their intent to destroy everybody. You could have a PTS person, which is a potential trouble source. That guy is going to trip and fall. He's going to mess up everything. He's going to make mistakes at work. He's a difficult person to deal with. They like to label stuff. So Hubbard, of course, came up with a label called a psychotic or psychosis. And it is a very specific thing. And when you have a person in Scientology who has a psychotic break, or what they call type 3, psychotic break and type 3 are interchangeable. They're the same thing. Automatically, that tells you certain things. Hubbard says this is what that person is. And I just want to read out what Hubbard is telling you. It's not the things that you're addressing on the introspection rundown, but it's your long-term understanding of what type of a person that is. Somebody who goes into a psychotic break. This is strictly just what Hubbard says about it. It's not.
Yeah,
doesn't make it fact.
Exactly, as we've said in earlier videos, we're describing in these videos what L.Ron Hubbard wrote and talked about and directed Scientologists to do. We're not endorsing any of this. We're saying that this is actually factual information, and and it's a good to put that disclaimer at the beginning of all of these things. So
yes, and okay, so here's how you can detect an insane person: insane, psychotic, and type 3. All three of those are the same thing in Hubbard's mind. Number one, pretending to do opposed duties. The real consistent result is destructive to the group in terms of breakage, lost items, injured business, etc. So you have a person who's destructive all around. The case is a no case gain or roller coaster and is covered under PTS symptoms. What this means is, as you try to put them through Scientology processing, they don't make any change. That's all that means, in the simplest terms. Did you want me to describe that more, or is that enough? Okay. No. They are usually chronically physically ill. They have a deep but carefully masked hatred of anyone who seeks to help them. The result of their help is actually injurious. They often seek transfers or wish to leave. They are involved in warfare with conflicts around them which are invisible to others. One wonders how they can be so involved or get so involved in so much hostility. So these are the 7 characteristics that Hubbard says you have to have. If you have these 7 characteristics, you have the possibility of ending up in a psychotic break. The only additional manifestation that clinches it would be what's called a rock slam.
It's a meter phenomenon, right? It's something that the needle on the e-meter does, where it's, and a rock slam is a very specific, the needle on an e-meter, the electropsychometer, Hubbard's diagnostic tool for, running their counseling programs. The needle can do different things on the meter. It can, fall, it can rise, it can, tick around, it can be dirty, it can be clean. It can do, there's lots and lots of things this little needle can do. And a rock slam is pretty wild, because what it does is, if this is the needle, it starts slamming back and forth like crazy. And it looks like the meter is actually broken, and in many cases that is what is going on. There's an electronic malfunction going on in the meter that can look exactly like what Hubbard says is also a mental phenomena, and the rock slam is supposed to indicate a hidden evil purpose.
Yes.
Right.
On the subject being discussed.
That's
yes.
Right. We're both running
like
off
cats.
the verbatim. Yeah.
So whatever the person is talking about when the reaction happens on the meter, it's theoretically that particular subject. The person has hidden evil purposes on it, and there are various ways to address those evil purposes. But when you have those 7 points plus those rock slams in a person, they're going to end up in a psychotic break.
As according to Hubbard.
According to Hubbard, yes.
These are the things that he says are what's behind that. So when you see somebody having some kind of a psychotic fit or psychotic break, then these are the labels. This is what Hubbard says is going on.
Yes, and anyone dealing with that person has those ideas in their head as they deal with that person.
Right.
From here on out. That's their label for who knows how long, for infinity.
Exactly. And Hubbard made some pretty bold claims about the subject of psychosis and his discoveries, quote unquote, about this. So let's go ahead and go over this a bit. Just to get right into this, the issue or bulletin that Hubbard wrote in January 1974 is called "The Technical Breakthrough of 1973!" The Introspection Rundown. And a rundown in Scientology is just a series of actions or processes that are done on somebody in an auditing type situation.
They have a specific end result. That's why it's called a rundown.
Yes.
Not everything is called a rundown, but the ones that are called rundowns have a very specific end requirement.
Right. And in this case, with introspection, the idea is to deal with somebody who is psychotic or has had a psychotic break. That is exactly and precisely what this rundown is tuned in to do.
That's right.
Hubbard, and I'll just read a bit from this bulletin. Hubbard said that man has never been able to solve the psychotic break. In fact, human beings are actually afraid of a person in a psychotic break and in desperation turn to psychiatry to handle. Psychiatry, desperate in its turn, without effective tech or technology, resorts to barbarities such as heavy drugs, ice picks, electric and insulin shock, which half kill the person and only suppress him. The fact remains there has never been a cure for the psychotic break until now. That's a bold claim. And Hubbard then says, the key is what caused the person to introspect before the psychotic break. The breakthrough was made on a person who, after a series of wrong indications, went into a full-blown psychotic break, violence, destruction, and all. Now, we're going to go into a very important piece of Scientology methodology, which has to do with this term wrong indications. Okay, and this is actually wrapped up into the steps of the introspection rundown. So there's no way around it. We have to explain this, and it's a little unique to Scientology. I've never seen anything quite like this anywhere else. It's something Hubbard developed in the 1960s, and the theory or the idea here is we're going to lay some terminology on you now, some Scientology terminology. Wrong indication is one of those pieces of terminology. It comes from a procedure in Scientology auditing called listing and nulling. And these are two steps that are done in auditing sessions, not just in the introspection rundown. This is done in lots of different ways. In Scientology, the procedure is always the same, and what you're trying to do is pretty similar with this indication business. So the idea is that there are parts of your case or your mind or your reactive mind which need to be isolated. And by isolating the exact right answer or specific item or thing that you're looking for, you can bring relief. You can bring some relief from past traumas or stress, stressful situations. And so listing is an action that's done with an e-meter. This is always done with an e-meter, never not with an e-meter. You have to use it to do this procedure properly, where you ask a question that has only one right answer. It's a question that will always come down to only one right answer. And the example we're going to use here is, this is not a question that would normally be used, but it just demonstrates the point. The question is, what is your favorite candy bar? Now, you've only got one favorite. There can only be one. That you could list in answer to that question, you could sit and wonder and list, this is the listing part of it, 10 different answers. You could go, oh man, my favorite candy bar. Well, I really like Baby Ruth, and I love Three Musketeers, and Mounds are great. Almond Joy. Oh man, I really like Almond Joy. Now, the way the person answers the question is they're on the e-meter holding the cans, and the auditor who asked this question, what's your favorite candy bar, is watching the needle in response to the person answering the question. And the needle will respond, it will read or fall on some of these answers. And you'll know you got the right answer because a very specific needle reaction will occur, either when the person says it or when the auditor then, let's say the guy says, okay, well, I'm not really sure what my favorite candy bar is. It could be blah, 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 blah. And the auditor writes down each of the answers and notes what the needle did, what the meter did in response to each of those items. Every single answer on the list is called an item. And so, again, Three Musketeers, Almond Joy, Mounds, etc. So now the auditor has a list. That's why it's called listing, because he's making a list of answers to the question. And now the auditor is going to read those answers back to the person and try to get this big reaction on the meter to one of those answers to get the one answer to the question. So he might, and this is called nulling, or nulling the question, right? That's why it's called listing and then nulling. So when you null, you call those answers back to the person. You say, Baby Ruth, Three Musketeers, and you're watching, the auditor is watching the needle. He's not asking the person, he's asking the meter pretty much, and the needle is supposed to respond. So he says, Baby Ruth, Three Musketeers, Almond Joy, reads all the items, and one of them, boom, has this big reaction, and the auditor then says, your item is Three Musketeers, because that's the one that responded the biggest there on that list. And the guy goes, yes, Three Musketeers, that's the one. I love that one. That's my favorite candy bar. Good. Your item is Three Musketeers, and we're done with that question now. And now the person has the exact right answer to that question. Again, that's a dummy question. The candy bar question would never be the question that would be asked in an auditing session. We'll go over some actual questions that would be asked this way during the course of the introspection rundown. But I'm just kind of describing the procedure right now. So here's the deal with this. Hubbard said that if you get the exact right answer, you will, blow the PC's mind. He will be very, very happy. He will feel relief. And, kind of a weight can even come off his shoulders because he's been struggling with what's the right answer to this question, or what's the thing I've been looking for and I haven't been able to figure it out. And he's been stuck in a mystery of it for millions of years in his past lives. This unanswered question or unresolved situation could be a really big deal for the person. So that's why Hubbard developed this procedure in the first place. And so a wrong indication, okay, we referred here in this bulletin here, he says that the breakthrough was made on a person who, after a series of wrong indications, went into a full-blown psychotic break. Well, here's another part of the theory of this listing and nulling, is that if a person has a wrong answer to a question like this, if he's been sitting there chewing on it, it'll weigh on him. It'll just sit in his mind like a splinter in the back of his mind, just negging him. It never resolves, and he's stuck with this wrong answer that either he came up with or somebody else might have given to him. And if somebody gives him an answer or tells him something that isn't really the exact right answer, but it kind of could come close, or the guy thinks it might be the right answer, or he's sort of chewing on it and wondering whether it's the right answer or not, that can be a wrong indication, right? The right indication, like according to the procedure we were doing where I just described the candy bar thing, there's only one right answer. The right answer was Three Musketeers. But if somebody told him your favorite candy bar is actually Baby Ruth, that would be what in Scientology is called a wrong indication. Baby Ruth is not his favorite candy bar, but he's being told it is, or somebody's telling him it is, or insisting that it is. So he's going to sit there thinking Baby Ruth is supposed to be my favorite candy bar. Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. He'll sit there and cognitive dissonance his way into trying to figure out how that might make sense, but it doesn't really make sense because it's not really the right answer. And he kind of really knows that deep down inside, but he's struggling to make this other answer make sense. And so it causes all kinds of like a mental kerfluffle that can go on for years, lifetimes in Scientology. I mean, a person can have a wrong indication given to them 30 million years ago, and it's still screwing them up. Again, according to L.Ron Hubbard. So, a wrong indication is a big deal in Scientology. It's something that needs to be dealt with because the person will be kind of spinny and can actually be a little bit weirded out about the whole thing. Maybe they're not thinking about it all the time, but when that subject or area comes up, they start getting all screwy on that area of life. And this could encompass any area of life. Like I said, I'm giving this candy bar example, but this could fit in lots and lots of different places. So now I will ask Sunny, for example, what kind of wrong indications did you see and have to repair or resolve as a case supervisor? What could be some examples of this?
I mean, anytime any listing question is done, first of all, any listing question starts with a who or what. Any question you get that's going to be a listing question, like a common one is, what is your out-of-thick situation? That one is a question that you ask to somebody who in their work situation is not doing the right job, and their boss will come in and ask them this question. It's actually that one is actually not done on the meter. It's done, across the desk with two people. And that person can say, I mean, what are examples of out-of-thick situations that somebody could have?
Well, I'll tell you, and it actually could be done on a meter as well. I mean,
yes, it can.
Properly done. It's supposed to be done on a meter where you're getting that. But it could be something like, well, I did take some money out of the till, but also, I haven't really been honest with my wife at home. I've been telling her I've been working late when actually I was going to the bar and getting some drinks before I went home because I've been so stressed. That could be my out-of-ethics situation. Or, gosh, oh, well, there was that one account that I was working on, and I didn't really, I kind of lied to the guy about how much it was going to, cost for this and that and the other thing. I was overestimating the cost, and I kind of gave him a wrong price on stuff. That was out ethics. That wasn't really too okay. On and on and on and on. He could sit there and be listing answers to this question, trying to figure out what's the one right answer to
fix everything. He's gonna be looking for the answer that's gonna fix everything. So after he gives that answer, he's gonna be thinking, okay, now this solves everything, and now everything's gonna go back to perfect at my work. And I mean, it's the same idea with the candy bar. It's like, if your favorite candy bar is the Three Musketeers, and then you eat your Three Musketeers, eat them for weeks and weeks and weeks, and all of a sudden you're like, no, I really don't like them. Or it's the same thing with the out-of-thick situation, where it either doesn't fix anything, which is the most common, or the guy just sits there and thinks about what a horrible person he is. Happened to Lisa McPherson. It's in her files. It was missed on her that she got one of these things, which is called a 3-MAPL. What is your out-of-thick situation? And soon after that, she's spinning. Now, whether Scientology is right or wrong, or whether it works or not, she believes it works. So she's believing in those answers that she's given, and she's spinning herself in with the answers that she's given. You can actually see it in those public records. You can see it in her write-ups after she got that action. All those manifestations are what you call wrong indications, manifestations of wrong indications.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not a dummy question we're talking about right now. This was actually asked of Lisa McPherson, and she actually tried to find the answer to the question. And
for
this
weeks,
thing of
you can see it she's looking for weeks. You're supposed to sit down, get an answer to the question, and be done with it. And then the person's supposed to be happy in any of those types of situations. And when you have somebody who goes off for weeks and they're still answering the question, well, whether the tech works or not, something went wrong right there, because that's all she's doing is trying to, she's still there trying to figure out the answer to that question for weeks. So that's an example of a wrong indication. Or it's also called a wrong item. Wrong item would be in these situations where you ask the question and then you have an item and you hand that item back to the person. Your item is the Three Musketeers. That would be a wrong item if it wasn't your item. A wrong indication could be really anything in life. Your mother saying, you know, you're just a horrible, lazy, dumpy piece of crap and I hate you. That could be a wrong indication to somebody where, you know, they that's how they live their life. They live their life thinking that's how they are.
Right.
And
exactly.
You find these and you just say, hey, that's not your item.
Hubbard was very clear about this, that this is not something you should be doing off an e-meter or in life. You should actually avoid asking people questions that are like listing type questions.
Who and what questions are not allowed outside of sessions in Scientology. They really don't use them, or they're not supposed to. But
yeah, it actually doesn't stop executives from doing this all the fucking time in Scientology.
Right.
But, this is one
who can you get some money from? Who?
Yeah, exactly. Or, you know, what's your problem? I mean, that's a listing question. Now, you know, of course, the other thing about listing questions is they have to be questions that really do only have one answer. Right? I mean, you know, if you were to ask you know, what movies have you seen? Well, that is a question that has, you know, 10,000 answers. I mean, if you've seen 10,000 movies in your life, so that's an improper listing question or a wrong listing question, and that could cause all kinds of trouble. There's a lot of little complications and rules to this and stuff. We're trying to explain thoroughly and in enough detail to get the concept across, but we're not trying to make you, the viewer here, a Scientology auditor. There's a lot more to know about this, but we're trying to get the idea across, and I think we have of you ask a question, it's supposed to have one answer. You're trying to find that one answer, and whether in an auditing session or in life, people can give you the wrong item or the wrong indication, and it can cause you to spin around and think and mope and try to figure out what the hell the right answer is, and it can cause a lot of disturbance. And Hubbard's claim here, that we're bringing this back to the Introspection Rundown now, Hubbard's claim is that he made a breakthrough in handling psychosis because he says that the person who he cured with, you know, that we talked about in earlier videos, he cured by sitting the guy down and getting that there was a series of wrong indications made to this guy, not just one, but, you know, one after another in the course of the guy's life or auditing. He was given a bunch of these that were wrong, and it caused him to introvert and introspect and look inward, trying to find the answer to the questions, and one after another, and it eventually caused the person to have a psychotic break. And so by going back and finding and resolving those wrong indications, you help the person to come out of that psychotic break. And that's a very key part of how the Introspection Rundown is done. So that's a big part of the theory that it's based on, is these 2 points we've gone over of psychosis has evil intentions underlying it, and the person's messing things up and is kind of an antisocial criminal type person already, and then you have these wrong indications on top of that, which lead to this psychotic break. That's Hubbard's breakthrough technology on this, that he says is 100% universally workable. Any psychotic can be cured with this procedure, because this is the big breakthrough that he made. That's the claim, and it's a big, bold claim with a case history of one.
Yes, that we know. Yeah, I mean, it appears that there was one And, you know, something I didn't mention on the previous video is the information on that first case is unavailable to you inside Scientology. They no, you know, I studied up on it. I didn't know somebody was locked up. You know, when I heard somebody was locked up on the rundown, I was like, what? You know, I was shocked. And I was like, what's the story? What is this? And I found it online, of course, it's not like anyone in Scientology is going to give you the background information. The only background information is whatever Hubbard chose to write down about it. That's it. There is no other background information. There's
right.
one source and no other source.
Exactly. There's no peer review done of this. There's no one else came in and checked Hubbard's work. No one else came along and reviewed, well, what actually worked with this guy? Was there any other possible reason that he might have come out of this psychotic break? Is there any other extenuating circumstances? Again, this is a case history of one, you know, maybe two people on a boat in the ocean that Hubbard was sailing around on in 1973 when this all went down. And based on that really scientifically completely invalid process, Hubbard claimed, we've got the cure. We've figured it all out, and psychiatry can now be gotten rid of because the last reason for even having psychiatry around has now been handled by us. We've got the corner on the market, and he then proceeded to cure no one else. I mean, if this was the big breakthrough of 1973, and with this they could have emptied out every insane asylum. You know, why they didn't then go do so, I have no idea. Right. No idea.
And if you aren't able to get the results that he writes about, it's on me as the auditor, or it's on the person themselves, and it's never ever ever a question of whether this Hubbard's technology is correct or not. Like in the specific situation of the Introspection Rundown, you have like 3, maybe 4 bulletins, a total of maybe 15 pages of information on how to do this rundown. And that's all there is. And you are not allowed to go outside the perimeters of these bulletins. You run into a situation that you don't know how to deal with, you have to use those bulletins only to deal with that situation. And that's it. You can't, you can't rely on you know, medical or psychiatric help, nothing. It's these rundowns, and they just, here's your bulletin, and I did it, so you can do it.
Precisely. This is actually, I'm glad you're bringing this up. This is a really important point in the handling of cases in general in Scientology. Is you don't bring in some other consultant or outside opinion or seek even a second opinion in the handling of a case. It's Hubbard's way or the highway. And this is one of the things about this, you know, in the real world, in the big wide world, where, you know, actual professionals operate, they run into things that they've not, you know, they'll run into a situation as, let's say, a doctor, right? A neurosurgeon. I mean, the highest of the high level doctors could run into a situation that puzzles them, or they're not sure exactly precisely what to do. Maybe they've handled a situation like this in the past. Maybe they've handled 10 situations like that in the past. That doesn't stop them from seeking the advice of other professionals in the field and saying, hey, take a look at what I'm dealing with here. I'm looking at doing X, Y, Z. What do you think about that? Oh, yeah, well, that might be, but have you considered A, B, and C? Oh, yeah, no, I didn't consider A, B, and C. That's a good point. And they talk to one another. They work things out based on all the data that all of them have to hand and all the mutual experience that they have. That is not how things are dealt with in Scientology.
Yes, the PC, the person receiving the counseling, is not allowed to talk to anyone about their counseling except the person doing the sessions on them, which is called the auditor. The auditor writes everything down and passes it on to the case supervisor. The case supervisor sits in an ivory tower off by themselves and is not allowed to talk to anyone about anything, ever. They never talk to the auditor ever about any of the cases. They are not allowed to. So nobody talks to anybody. It's all by files, and that's it. The PC can't talk to anybody, especially can't talk to the case supervisor. You can pass them in the hallway, but you can't say a single thing PC can't talk to anybody else about their case. It's only for the auditor to talk to, and that auditor has to hand it over to the case supervisor. Nobody talks to. It's written only. It's in written form only, and the case supervisor is going to give the auditor instructions, and then the auditor does that on the pre-clear or the person receiving the sessions. So that's how the counseling sessions go. There's no such thing as a second opinion. If the auditor messes up, they can go get correction. There are correction steps that can be done to fix the auditor, but all he does is read more Hubbard. That's
exactly. It's not like he goes and checks out the latest edition of Psychology Today to see if something might be up that he hasn't learned about yet. Again, It all comes down to Hubbard's way or the highway. There's no two ways to do anything in Scientology.
Hubbard has already told us what is wrong with that PC. We just have to fix it. We already know what's wrong with him. He's evil. He has hidden evil purposes. And we need to get him out of this psychotic state so that we can find his evil purposes. That's all we're trying to do with the Introspection Rundown. That's it.
That's right. It makes these fundamental assumptions, and the reason we're stressing this is because this is not good mental therapy. But this is how it's done in Scientology. Is these labels are assigned, these assumptions, very fundamental assumptions about a person's character and history are made based on their behavior, and there isn't any other possible solution or way that this can be addressed. This is how it's done. So that's keeping Scientology working. When you hear that expression, this is what we're actually talking about with that. So this is a key part of Scientology methodology. Now, you also wanted to discuss the point about Thetan, mind, body.
Thetan is basically your spirit, and Scientology addresses you as a Thetan. All Scientology auditing is addressed towards the spirit. Dianetics, any Dianetic type processes are addressed towards the mind. And of course, body is just physical, medical conditions and so forth. So on the first steps of the Introspection Rundown, you've got the body under control. The theory is that the person is eating properly, getting enough sleep, has gotten a medical diagnosis. They're getting vitamins for, regular daily vitamins just to, get them back up to health. That's the addressing of the body. The next step is some Scientology steps which address the spirit or the Thetan themselves. And then the last steps of the rundown are addressing the mind, which is the Dianetic section of the rundown. Another minor point I wanted to make on this is there is a stipulation for how to do this rundown on clears and OTs, because when you have a clear or an OT, you can't run Dianetics on them because they don't have a reactive mind anymore. And my question is, why do you need a stipulation for clears and OTs on a rundown that's for somebody in a psychotic break? I mean, you're just right there. You're saying Scientology doesn't work. I mean, that's just a banner saying, hello, Scientology does not work. Even if you're clear or OT, that doesn't mean you're not going to have a psychotic break.
You're supposed to be achieving these higher states of awareness and being called clear, and then OT, these OT levels. And these are supposed to be very advanced spiritual states of awareness and existence. And yet you're still susceptible to having a psychotic break. You could still be psychotic. How do these things go together? Well, they shouldn't. And yet the actual instructions in the rundown have instructions for, if you're doing this on a clear or an OT, then this is what you do. Something else also to cover on this in terms of this listing and nulling procedure is no matter what the answer that the pre-clearer, when asked a listing question in an auditing session, can give any answer he wants. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense to the auditor. It doesn't even have to be coherent necessarily. Any answer the person gives is the answer he gives, however crazy it might be. If here theoretically, the person could give an answer to the question that's almost even non sequitur, and the auditor, in the framework of auditing and the way it works, would have to accept the pre-clear's answer. If the meter responds the way it's supposed to, that's the person's item. Hubbard laid out, some rules about this, and he said, that if the person says it's a wrong item, it's a wrong item. So you don't argue with the guy. If you say, okay, your item is, Three Musketeers, and the guy goes, no, it's not. Okay, it's not. You're not going to sit there and debate with the guy or tell him, well, the meter said it is. There's not going to be any of that. You're just going to go back and refigure out, you're going to go back over that procedure until you get an answer that the person is satisfied with. But the person could give an answer like, what's your favorite candy bar? Succotash. Collard greens. He's given like crazy answers that are not real. I'm just giving these sample answers to demonstrate the point. So he could give something that is not even really an answer to the question, but if he says it and the meter responds and the auditor says, okay, well, the meter says so, yeah, your item is succotash, that's the guy's item. And it's not on the auditor or the case supervisor to tell the guy that that's not his item.
That's right.
So it's all about what the e-meter responds to and what the person is saying and how he responds. That's what determines whether you have a right item or not whether it logically makes sense or not.
And it does something which I don't know if you have ever thought about or realized, but it enables people. I'll try to give you an example. If you have somebody coming in who, well, let's say they've got their vice, a bad vice, whatever their vice is. They like to torture animals, and they come into Scientology. Well, I'm just trying to think of one.
No,
they come into
that
Scientology.
Is some people do, yeah.
Trying to fix the fact that they like to torture animals, but they're too scared to tell anybody I torture animals. So then if you get into a situation where you're doing a listing and nulling and it gets into the neighborhood of an answer to this, I torture animals could be his answer. But yet he comes up with another answer like,
I steal money from my mom or something?
I steal money from my mom. And then his item becomes, I steal money from my mom. Now he knows that torturing animals is okay because it didn't come up. This happens very often. And I mean, I've talked about it on these. You're probably going to have to edit this part out, but I'm going to rant for a minute anyway. Because you have these things where Hubbard gives examples of touching children or molesting, or, if you complain about molesters, that means you've done it on your whole track somewhere. You get people who come in like that, and then they get an item indicated to them, or they get, nothing comes up on this. They know they have something going on in their minds. But then you have these Hubbard references that say, well, he's not saying go be a pedophile, but he's not condemning it either. He's not doing either one. So then you have this person that drifts through Scientology and he says, well, kissing a 7-year-old is okay. Hubbard says it right there. And so it doesn't even cross his mind. He tries to go into auditing sessions. This stuff doesn't come up, then it must be okay. And that's how that stuff goes. You could talk about it with sexual perversions. You could talk about it with, people who hurt other people, hurt children, hurt elderly, any of those things. They say, well, if it didn't come up in my auditing, it didn't come up in my Scientology, then that means it's okay.
They're basically turning their moral compass over to the e-meter and saying, well, if the e-meter says it, then it must be true. And if the e-meter doesn't say it, well, then I guess there's no big thing on that because, hey, the meter's what really works.
Yes, the meter works. And if my item is that I hurt my grandmother when I was 5 years old, then my ideas about being a pedophile have nothing to do with anything. They get separated like that, and then the person justifies their current behavior, and Scientology enables that kind of behavior. And I don't know if that's been covered anywhere, but if it doesn't get brought up and addressed in Scientology directly, it enables that person in that field, whatever they're trying to go with, it enables it. Anyway, you might want to edit that out. I don't know.
No, I'm going to keep that in because that's a very important point. What we're doing here is we're talking about the methodology of Scientology, but we're also critically thinking about it, which is something that when you're getting trained on this stuff in a Scientology church, you don't really do. You know, we don't
Right.
sit there when we're reading Hubbard and think, yeah, but wait a minute, what about this? And what about this? What about this? That's not how Scientology training works. When we're getting trained on this stuff, we're reading it and going, oh, well, I can think of example 1 and 2 and 3 where this would work, so therefore, of course it works. And you don't think, wait a second, what about, you know, these places where it doesn't make a whole lot of sense or doesn't sound like it's going to work? And that's a very important point, using, you know, turning over your you know, your moral
Responsibility.
yeah, your responsibility for your own actions to the e-meter. And well, if the meter doesn't read, then I guess it's not a problem.
That
And
is
the other
rampant.
one,
It's rampant in Scientology.
okay, so you saw that yourself as a
Oh
case
yeah.
supervisor.
Oh yeah.
And the other thing being, you know, and the other point being that we made that a person's answers can be crazy answers. They can be completely
Right.
non sequitur, and yet they would still be potentially accepted in certain circumstances. And the answers, you know, the questions that are being asked, I mean, I'm giving this very, very, you know, non-significant question about candy bars. The kind of questions that are asked in Scientology auditing are much more hardcore than that. They are reaching in to try to figure out why people act, you know, crazy and do nutty things and are stressed and traumatized. I mean, this is the stuff that is the darker side of life. And
Yeah.
those are the kind of questions that are being asked. So it actually is pretty significant stuff to people's lives when they're actually in a real auditing session, or like we'll go over in the introspection rundown, being asked.
I can give you an
stuff.
example of a listing question. I think that might be another one we could
Sure.
put in here, and you can see which one you want. Another one is in grade 3 is, what change have you caused in another's life? You know, you're looking for, you know, auditing is always looking for the negative side of it. So you're not looking for, oh, I gave my daughter a flower and she brightened up. No, you're looking for answers like, I didn't take my mother to the doctor and she had a stroke. That's a change you caused in your mother's life. What change, you know, and you're looking for the one that has affected you the most, you know, in your life. So that would be an example of a listing question that, you know, you could end up with a right item or a wrong item. You could, you know, you could say, well, I didn't bring my mother, you know, I didn't bring my mother to the hospital. So now when she had a stroke, now, you know, one side of her body doesn't work properly because of me. You know, that would be an example of a listing question and an answer to a listing question.
Right, exactly. And if you have a guy who's turning over, you know, well, what's the right answer to an e-meter, which doesn't even work in the first place, but you know, we're gonna pretend that it does. You know, he could have 3, 4, 5 other answers sitting there that he could be, you know, that be weighing on him or whatever. And again, also, it's pretty arbitrary to say that there's only one, you know, one
Yeah.
right answer to that question. I mean, the whole theory of this is flawed. But
Yes.
you know, but again, we're just kind of explaining this is what Scientology does. So I think we've kind of gotten this across as far as how these wrong indications work. And again, going back to the bulletin, Hubbard says in the Introspection Rundown, quote, "The essence of the Introspection Rundown is looking for and correcting all those things which caused the person to look inward worriedly and wrestle with the mystery of some incorrectly designated error. The result is continual inward looking or self-auditing without relief or end." You know, the person's just all spun in their own head. And this is what Hubbard says is needs to be dealt with, and that's what we're going to do on this rundown. So, okay, so now let's go ahead and get actually, now that we've explained some fundamental principles underlying this, let's go ahead and talk about some of the steps themselves. There's a lot of, you know, there's pages and pages of steps here, but we're just going to cover the broad strokes of how this rundown is done.
There's 3 major sections of how these are dealt with, how this rundown is done. The first step, well, obviously, you know, you getting the person, what we would call get the person sessionable is, you know, the food, the sleep, daily walks, the vitamins, the isolation, the muzzled, no speech, all of that, the vitamins, all of that we've covered. While the person is going through that, you have your auditor who gathers up all the files of that person and has to read everything everything involving that person. Could be their central files, the letters that have been written to him and his answers to those letters. It could be any files that the registrar has on his, finances. It could be his PC folders, which have all of his auditing sessions in them. His student folder, which is going to have all of the courses that he's completed and the essays that he's written up and so forth. And then you'll have, I'm forgetting one of the big ones. Oh, the ethics file,
the ethics
of course.
File. Yeah.
That's where
right.
most of it's that's where you're going to find most of the stuff that you're going to need to deal with in this rundown, actually. But so the person has to read through all of those, and the auditor is going to make a list. He's just sitting at a desk on his own and making a list of things that would be called severe points of introversion.
Okay.
So what you're going to do,
anything that looks like the guy spun in or went in or into his head because of what's being described in the folders.
Yes, and the first one that you find is the most recent. You want to find the most recent one first, and then the rest of them you just list them out. Let me see what could be a good example.
So, for example, you might find a report in the guy's ethics file from a week ago where let's say the guy's a Sea Org member, okay, and he's doing his job, and the senior writes a knowledge report on the guy because he says he was slacking off, and I told him he needs to stop being such a lazy bum and get to work because I'm sick of him just, sloughing off his work and making me have to do all of his job for him. So the guy writes this in the report. So the auditor might see that and go, there's a potentially a point there where this guy got introverted or his attention went inward because the senior was telling him he was a lazy dog who couldn't do his work. And
yes, lazy dog who couldn't. You are a lazy dog who couldn't do your work. So that could be the first wording, especially if it happened a week ago. So once you have your first wording, you're actually ready to go in and you'll sit across from that person who is in that psychotic break. The person has to have had enough food and sleep. You're going to hook them up to an e-meter, and all you're going to do is indicate, I would like to indicate, how did you say that? That you're a lazy
dog who can't do your work or something like that. Yeah, whatever.
I would like to indicate that you're a lazy dog who can't do your work, may have acted as a point of introspection. That's it.
Okay,
you watch what the meter does. It has to have a good reaction, and you end your session. Your first session is usually around 15 seconds. Okay. 15 to 30 seconds at the most. You'll do that. You'll tell him that. Whether he says anything or not has nothing. He could say something or not say something, but you end after that. You just another point that Hubbard believes is important in teaching someone how to control their emotions is starting and stopping sessions. When you start the session, you turn on the emotion, and you stop the session, you turn off the emotion. He's trying to teach, the starting and ending of sessions is supposed to teach the person to control their emotions so that they're only in session. I don't know if you know that, but that's part of the reason why the sessions are short, is teaching them start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop.
Interesting. Okay. In other words, the idea that the person who's receiving this introspection rundown, the person who had the psychotic break, is supposed to subtly or subconsciously be taught this block of time. This is the session, which starts with this is the session. That's the beginning of the session. This is the period of time where it's appropriate for you to experience whatever emotions and whatever you're supposed to experience. And then when the auditor says end of session, okay, that's it. Now you're done with that, and you're not supposed to dramatize your emotions anymore, or
yes,
that's what you're saying there?
Yes, I mean it's not enforced at this level, but any level of sessions is treated that way.
That is very true. That's a very good point. I had never really articulated that before. But I see that that is very, very true in Scientology, because because you have Sea Org members especially, I mean, these people lead very stressful lives,
Hmm.
and you're not supposed to have case on post, as I've discussed at length in other videos. So you're not supposed to, be experiencing any restimulation or past, trauma, stress, whatever, or overwhelm, or you're not supposed to show any of that. It's just supposed to be smile on the face all the time
Yes.
when you're doing your job. And so the job, when you're on your post, which is what you're pretty much on all day long, you're supposed to just be Johnny on the spot, and in control of your emotional reactions and in control of the words and things that you're doing. And that's all fine, except sometimes, especially under very, very stressful situations, it gets a little hard to be that way. But yeah, you are trained in Scientology that it's only when you're in an auditing session that you get to really unload
Yes.
and be
It's
yourself and
yes.
be,
It's a start and stop.
yeah, very true. Very, very true. Because I'd always have to gear myself up after a session to go back to post, to go back to my job and sort of put on my armor
Yes.
mentally, psychologically. That's
And
what
knock off
and
those
we would talk about
emotions.
this.
Yeah.
As Sea Org members, we would talk about this. Oh yeah, no case on post. Got to gird up and get back on post. And and this is difficult. This is very psychologically trying for a person.
Yeah. It
You know,
doesn't matter if your mother just died.
so getting back to the rundown now, there could be a series of these potential points of introversion, severe points of introversion that a person would find by going through the folders and files and figuring all
Yeah,
this stuff out, right?
I was gonna read what it says.
Yep.
It says locate by study or research of the person's case or via associates or two-way comm, which we can talk about, the
Yep.
last severe point of introversion just prior to the current psychotic break or illness. There may be several severe points of introversion prior or subsequent to the one that triggered the break or illness. These points are identified by their upsetting or worrisome effect on the PC. Each is noted down for handling. So it gives you a space where you can list out each of these that you're going to be indicating to him.
Okay. So you write all this stuff down and then one by one go in and indicate these to the person.
Yes, you normally in the beginning, they're very short sessions, 15 to 30 seconds, and the sessions get longer and longer with each one. So, theoretically, the person is more in touch with you. Sometimes you run into, you tell him one and he doesn't like it. I've had him throw the cans at me and flip the meter in my face and try to bolt out of the room. And I have to learn to control the person because they're not allowed to go anywhere. I have to fix it and make them happy, make them
Wow.
satisfied in that session. And yeah, I mean,
and you oversaw the delivery of about, what did you say, 5 of these introspection
I was
rundowns?
over the medical on 2 of them. I did the sessions on 2 of them, and the last one was I was the case supervisor, and
Okay.
I don't know how she ended up on the rundown because the reason she went on the rundown was weird in the first place. I'm not going to say anything about who she was, but she was a Sea Org member, and she had inherited a bunch of money, and these IAS regs hounded her all night long, and she gave her entire inheritance over, freaked out, got in her car, and took off. She comes back, and they put her on the introspection rundown.
Of course they did.
Now,
It's always worse than you think. I don't know why I'm surprised by this stuff. Of course they would use this rundown to screw somebody over out of some money. Jesus Christ, of course they would. It never even occurred to me, but of course they would. We didn't talk about that before the video, so I didn't even know that was coming, but I just
yeah, I mean,
God damn
I
it,
left.
these guys.
She was in the middle of the rundown. I don't know. I would assume she got sent to the RPF after she finished the rundown. It's like, take all her money. She's upset about it. Put her on this rundown and send her to the RPF because that's what Hubbard says to do.
Right. I mean,
And
every single possible worst thing that could happen to somebody is embodied right there.
yeah.
You know.
I mean, normally as a case supervisor, somebody could hear that and say that I put her on the rundown. I didn't put her on the rundown. The senior case supervisor put her on the rundown and handed it to me. She was already doing the rundown, and I'm like, what's going on here? I wasn't an intern. I wasn't completed on my internship for the CS. So I wasn't allowed to see. I said I was what would you call that? I was an intern. That's what they call it in
Well, you
Scientology.
were
I don't know what
interning.
you call
Yeah,
it.
I mean, you were.
Yeah.
That's
I
what,
wasn't
that's
permanently certified.
Yeah, an internship in Scientology as an auditor is the same as an internship as a doctor. I mean,
Okay.
you're supposed to be learning under the tutelage of a trained, acknowledged authority, and so you're not in a position where you're going to go, "Hey, you got the wrong call here, bub.
Yeah.
You did this wrong." No, the intern's job is to listen and learn and follow directions. So,
Yes.
yeah, so you were not in a position to do something about that at that time.
Yes, I was interned as a Class 6 auditor. I just wasn't interned as a Class 6 CS.
Yeah, the case supervision, yeah.
Yes, the case supervisor, that's right. So anyway.
All right, fair enough.
So we go through, we have the list of points, and for the most part, most people, once they get through all of those indications, are up to a rational level enough where minor amounts of communication, the muzzled part, for the most part, ends. Because these steps, you're indicating these, you might do like 4 or 5 sessions in one day, but it takes a couple of, I would say 4 or 5 days before the person is able to be spoken to at all. And they're still pretty muzzled. They'll use small answers to questions. They won't engage the person in any sort of conversation at all, but very minimal conversation after all of those.
All right. So these indications are done to find past points of introversion and indicate them to the person to get him to chill out and hopefully respond favorably to those. Then what?
Okay, once you've gotten through all of those, then you're going to go this listing annulling thing that we had embarked upon. This would be the step 2 of this, which is where you are going to verify and correct all of the lists that the person has done. So here's an example. Well, here you're going to be my pre-clear. Your question was, what is your favorite candy? And the answer that you had come up with, the item was Three Musketeers. Is that item correct?
Right. And the guy will say, oh, yeah, no, that totally made sense to me. Or he might say, Three Musketeers, really? Did I say that? No, Three Musketeers is my favorite candy bar. It's always been Baby Ruth. And you've got him on the e-meter, and the meter goes boom, and you go, okay, good, it was Baby Ruth, it wasn't Three Musketeers, and now you have verified and corrected that earlier list that was already done. So that's a whole procedure in auditing. Yep.
Or you could say, yes, Three Musketeers is my right item, but then the meter's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and I still have to do more stuff with that, because there's other procedures that we'll have to go through, because maybe you've decided, oh, you're saying it's the right item, but it's not the right item. So we have to go through a whole bunch of stuff till the meter agrees with your words.
Exactly. You have to
Which gets very complicated sometimes. Very
complicated because in Scientology auditing, it's not enough that what the guy says. This is where there's a huge difference. And why, when we use the word counseling, we're using it very loosely. This is a huge difference between what is done in psychology or psychiatry and what is done in Scientology. Is in many, many times in auditing, in Scientology auditing, you don't care what the guy says. If the meter doesn't prove out what the guy is saying, if the meter needle is not doing certain things when it's supposed to, you don't care what he said. It ain't the answer, or it's not the truth, or it's not the end of the process. You have to keep going until the e-meter and the person are in agreement on whatever the answer is. And this can cause hours of consternation and struggle on the part of the pre-clear to get something that will satisfy the auditor and the e-meter.
Yes, that relying on the e-meter is, again, it's what enables it. People will say, oh, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a pedophile, I'm not an animal torturer because the meter didn't say I was. If the meter doesn't say that you are that thing, you're not. Doesn't matter what you do in your real life. Even if you do torture animals, you're not an animal torturer because the meter didn't say that you're an animal torturer. And they really think like that. And Scientology and this whole reliance on the e-meter enables people in ways that you can't even imagine.
Exactly. This is really twisted stuff. And that's why and again, just to, beat a dead horse on this, that's why we're going over this in detail, so y'all out there can really see how this really works and the nitty-gritty details of day-to-day Scientology.
I was worried I wouldn't be able to get these points across because it's so convoluted. Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping this is a good way of explaining it. So
yeah, you're doing great. I think we're getting this across quite well. And of course, y'all can let us know, because if you have questions, do leave them in the comment section of this video, and we will see them. And very likely we'll be doing more videos in this series. We'll see what comes of this. But I think there's going to be more to talk about on this particular subject, even though this video is going to, kind of be the be-all, end-all of this introspection rundown. That's the point of what we're doing right now with this. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so you go back, getting back to the rundown itself, you've done the prior indications. You've now gone and corrected earlier listing actions the guy's done in his auditing. This is really something. We're going to have people quite tuned in to Scientology terminology by the time they're done with this video. I never imagined when I started doing videos that I would be explaining L and N or VC. I mean, these terms, verifying, correcting lists and listing and nulling. This is complex stuff in Scientology. So if you're tracking with what we're talking about, you are getting some of the most complicated parts of Scientology procedures. This is as detailed as it gets.
Yes.
So okay, so you go back and correct all those earlier lists, and then what do you do?
In most cases, that can take quite a while.
Yeah.
Normally you may get to this next step, but a lot of them come out of psychotic breaks before you even get this far. They just, I couldn't tell you how they came out of their psychotic breaks or why. It could have been just a matter of time and being away from the stimulative environment of the Sea Org.
In a room and you're not talking to them and they're just chilling and they get some sleep and they get some food.
And nobody's yelling at them.
Somebody's actually talking nicely to them.
Yes.
I'll bet you that is probably the therapeutic value of this, more so than any of this VC and list correction and all this other nonsense. I'll bet you just giving the guy 24, 48 hours of sleep time and chilling
time, out,
is probably doing more good for the guy than anything else. And if anybody's familiar with the stressful environment of Scientology and the Sea Org especially, or how rough life can get for some people in some circumstances. I mean, it's nice to just, this is why we have vacations.
Yes.
So, okay, well, there is, so then there is this other procedure we kind of have to talk about a little bit for these next steps, I guess, which is two-way comm.
Yes, you're going to get the wording of the first point in number one. The first one you indicated, what do we call him? You're a dirty dog. Let's say that.
Yeah. Yep,
so let's say his boss called him, you're a useless dirty dog. And that was a point of, I'd like to indicate you were a useless dirty dog was a point of introspection. You did that at the very beginning. Yep. Now we're going to come back around and we're going to say, what would you call such an incident?
Meaning the incident where the senior walked in and said that to him. What would you call that incident? And the guy goes,
when the senior...
I'd say I would call that the time my senior introverted me.
Okay. The time my senior introverted me.
Good. So then you would write that down.
Which is what I'm doing because I want to, yes.
For the guy.
Yes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do what's called two-way comm. You're going to talk about your thoughts and your considerations about that. What were your thoughts about that time when your senior introverted you?
Okay, good. And two-way comm meaning two-way communication.
Yes.
There's supposed to be a back and forth now of communication between the auditor and the pre-clear about this subject under discussion.
Yes, but the
Okay.
auditor has very specific commands that he can use, which are thoughts and considerations. And I think there's a third one. It's been a while. It's been like 20
Feelings?
years. I think there's a third one, but there's only three of them that you can ask. So it's not
I,
really
is it
a back and
feelings?
forth. Feelings. There you go.
Yeah. So the
Who
auditor
has
is
feelings?
guided. It sounds like it, and it looks like it's just a conversation. It's
Yes.
called two-way communication. It's an actual procedure in Scientology auditing. It's not just a loose conversation. The auditor is guided by certain rules where he can only ask certain questions, prompting the person, the pre-clear, to talk more and more about the subject under discussion, to kind of unburden thoughts and feelings and attitudes and things that the pre-clear's built up on this subject under discussion. And the idea is you're just kind of unburdening some of the stress and emotion the guy has on the particular topic under discussion. In this case, the time his senior walked in and introverted him, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, personally, as an auditor, I probably wouldn't accept that answer. The time my senior introverted me, I would probably try to get you to talk about it a little bit more to make it not go back into this word introverted. But that's just getting nitpicky on you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, whatever, in the
Yeah,
end,
whatever.
it's going to be whatever I say.
Yes.
I will get to choose the final wording of this thing.
Yes, you will get to choose the final wording. What would you call such an incident? The time my senior made me feel bad or something.
Right.
So then the first point, we do the two-way comm, which is flow one, which is you receiving. Let's talk about the four flows really quickly.
Okay, we'll do this
No?
real fast. No, it's fine. It's fine. Because here's another thing about Scientology. We are so giving everybody a crash course in Scientology auditing right now. This is awesome.
Do not try the introspection rundown on anyone at home.
No, please
don't.
Okay, another
aspect. I'll do it real simple. I have a real simple way to explain it.
Okay, great. All right. Well, let me just give a little thing on this, which is
okay.
There's a basic philosophical principle in Scientology that it's not just what was done to you that is your problem, and it's not just what you've done to others that is your problem. There's actually four directions or vectors or flows on which things happen. And any one of these things can cause mental stress, trauma, and difficulties. And so Hubbard called these the four flows. And any question or command can be given or run tailored to each of these flows. Okay, so you have, so go ahead and walk through what the flows are there.
Okay, we'll just do it with a candy bar. Flow one we're talking about your flows. Okay, so flow one would be me handing you a candy bar. So you're receiving it. That's flow one. Receiving is flow one. Flow two is if you give me a candy bar, you're handing me a candy bar. Flow three is you seeing two people give a candy bar to each other. So you can see your mom give a candy bar to a grandchild. And then flow zero is you give yourself a candy bar. So those are your four flows.
So you see how, so to the viewers here who are watching this, you see how that's different directions, right? You to others, others to you, others to others, and you to yourself. Those are the four flows.
Causing to yourself. It's a active action of causing something to yourself. So.
Right.
The time my senior introverted me, your first one would be, tell me about, the time your senior introverted you. And then you'd switch that around and say, I want to talk to you now about times you introverted your senior.
Right. See,
so we'll talk about that. Mm-hmm.
You're going flow one first, the senior to you, and then you turn that around and it's you doing it to somebody else.
Yes. To that senior or another senior,
right?
Another boss, and then you'll do it on flow three, which is you seeing two people doing it to each other, which is you can never run out of answers for that one in the Sea Org. That's for sure.
Got that right. And then you doing it to yourself.
You causing yourself to introvert yourself.
Okay, good. So
those
each
would
of
be
these,
your four flows,
and each one of those could be, the auditor asked the question, and the guy could talk for, minutes or hours on that particular flow. And you're going to do all 4 of these flows. You're going to check these and see if you need to, and again, the meter is the thing that determines whether you're going to do or not do any of these. But that's the idea, is the next step of the rundown is you would take that first incident and you'd run it on those 4 flows. And you're going to see this repeated over and over again throughout this rundown as we go through the steps.
Yes, and so now what you've done is what's called the Scientology handling, which is addressing the spirit on this item, the time my senior introverted me. Because all you've done is really talk about it kind of lightly, although It is kind of a heavy subject. You're lightly discussing it to kind of release some built up negative charge connected with it, supposedly.
Yeah.
So then you're going to go through that with each of these points of introspection. You're get them worded, and then you're going to talk about them on all these different, in all these different directions. You causing it to happening to you, you causing it to someone else, seeing it between 2 people, and then causing it to yourself. Whatever these other points are, it could be. Do we want to give more examples of points of introversion?
Not
I think we're
really.
okay on that.
I think the point here really is that I hope everybody's getting that you could spend hours and hours and hours doing just these steps we're talking about right now. Taking each of these points and breaking them down and getting the guy to talk about them and talk about them and talk about them. So it gives him a chance where if the space alone and the time and some sleep and some food alone haven't given the guy enough relief, now you get a chance. Now the guy gets a chance to just unload and just like talk and talk and talk about all the different flows and ways that these introverting things that happen to him could be looked at or discussed. And so again, it's a chance for the guy to unburden himself and really get a load off. And he's got a captive audience because the auditor has to just sit there and listen to anything he's got to say about it and encourage him to keep talking until he feels better about what it is that he's talking about. So it's a chance to just let the guy just have at it.
But there is one small point I want to make, which is specific to this rundown and the persons that end up on this rundown. It's uncommon to ask a question and get a direct answer. It's very difficult to get
Good point.
an answer. Like you do the indications, and then if I try to ask this person for feelings and thoughts, it's way over their heads in most cases. I mean, I'm trying to ask him about, his senior introverting him. If I got that answer out of him, it's a miracle, because it's difficult to get. I mean, the ones that I ran into, the ones that I was doing, I would run into, you ask them, what color is that wall? I'm just giving a random question. I wouldn't ask him that question. But if I tried to ask that person, what color is that wall? He's going to tell me that door needs to be punched in because that window is supposed to be broken. And that's the answer that I'm going to get.
Right.
And I would run into this where, we're not qualified. Here I am again around, I don't know, and here I am. My instructions from Hubbard are repeat my question until I get an answer. I'm just going to sit there and he's not going to leave the room. So I'm going to ask him again, what color is that wall? And he's going to tell me, those squirrels outside, they need to be, their heads need to be ripped off. I mean, those are the kind of things. And I'm going to say again,
I'm glad you have the experience of having done this, because I, of course, even right now, critically looking at these points and looking at what could be wrong with this, naturally go, oh yeah, well, you give a guy a chance to, to talk to someone and to discuss this stuff. But you're dealing with somebody who is in non sequitur land.
Yes.
So
all
really, are we really?
Yeah. I mean, they're in a whole other world that is nothing to do with what we're trying to come in here and ask these questions and help this person with these steps, and they're off in another world. They're on their own doing their own thing. And then, like we said in the other videos, as soon as they can put 2 sentences together, bye, see you later. That's what happens.
Which is its own level of insanity.
Yes.
Um,
So
okay, well, theoretically, these steps are supposed to be done.
We managed to get a person this far.
Okay.
You know, even when I'm trying to, is Three Musketeers your item? It could take me an hour and a half to get an answer to that question.
Right.
You
So
know,
we
just
could be
I'm going to hear all
at-
kinds of stuff, but I'm not going to
We
get
could
an
be
answer
looking
to
at weeks of work here.
It could be yes, and
If it's just properly done. And
yeah,
and
and
again,
you have to have an auditor who is willing to just sit there and keep asking the question, no matter what that person says, no matter if they try to attack you. You know, I've been in situations and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I mean, Hubbard tells me this person's attacking me. That means his reactive mind is in full force. I'm making progress. I'm sitting here getting attacked. I'm the only one in the room, and the person is twice my size. None of that matters. I'm making progress with this person. I have to learn to protect myself, but I can't, you know, what am I going to do? I have to get him back in the chair, and I have to ask him, is Three Musketeers your item or not? You know, no matter what, he's putting his fist through glass. I'm still going to sit him down, bleeding and everything, and he's going to answer my question, because that's what Hubbard told me to do. I have to get him to answer my question, and he's not going to go anywhere. I'll be nice about it, but he's not going to go anywhere until I get an answer to whether Three Musketeers is his candy bar or not. I mean, that's not the real question, but that's how it goes. And, you know, when you try to get this far into the rundown, for the most part, most of the ones that I did, I didn't get into the next handlings, but we are going to discuss them. What I was explaining is we've done the Scientology steps, we've done the body handling, and now we've done the Scientology steps, which is the idea of the Scientology steps is to separate the mind from the spirit, so they're not attached to each other and trying to kill each other, I guess you would say. So now they're kind of separated out a little bit, and now all the rest of the steps of the rundown do the Dianetic handlings on them, which is clearing out the engrams. I don't know how deep you want to get into that, but
well, anybody who's watched my channel for any length of time or knows anything about Dianetics knows that it deals with past incidents of stress and trauma, and we call these incidents engrams. They are moments of stress and trauma which contain pain and unconsciousness. Those two things have to be present in every single engram. And Dianetics seeks to find those moments of pain and unconsciousness in your past, and using a kind of recall therapy where you re-experience the incident over and over and over again, you supposedly reduce the stress and trauma and emotional charge connected with those incidents of pain and unconsciousness, or engrams. And that is supposed to clear out a part of your mind called the reactive mind, which stores all this stuff and uses it against you. It reacts against you. That's why it's called a reactive mind, or one of the reasons it's called that. It is the most summary version of Dianetics I could possibly give you, but that's basically what it involves. Regression therapy and reliving earlier moments of stress and trauma is something that's been known in psychology for decades, for maybe over a century. It has a limited degree of workability. It has been tried out with as not Dianetics, but regression type therapy has been used with veterans to treat PTSD, stuff like that. From my research on it, which is not extensive, it has a limited degree of workability. It is not universally workable, but Hubbard's claims from 1950 are that it is universally workable. Everyone's supposed to respond to this. Everybody has engrams in their past, and by relieving those engrams, you relieve, you actually erase an entire part of the mind that is harmful to you and is sort of a subconscious mind, and you then go, you achieve this new state of being called clear, where life is wonderful and great because you're no longer affected by these engrams, which cause not only stress and trauma, but give you psychosomatic illnesses and diseases. I mean, Hubbard claimed that leukemia and cancer and bad eyesight and gout and all sorts of things were caused by these engrams. So this is supposed to be really powerful stuff. Dianetics processing is used, this technique is used extensively throughout different rundowns in Dianetics and Scientology, and this is one of the places where it's used.
Yes, they would run out on the 4 flows that we talked about. The same thing that they had just done that 2-way comm step on, where they talked about, what was it? The time my senior introverted me. So you're going to take that and run through that incident over and over and over again, over and over in your mind, earlier, earlier, earlier. And it's not until it's like released, it has to be erased. It's got to be gone. You don't see any pictures. The whole thing is gone. And you find what's called the postulate at the beginning of the incident, which is just what the guy decided as a result of that incident. Like, I'm going to always be introverted. There you go. There's your postulate.
Exactly.
And then
this is supposed to be the most thorough way of, I mean, you're erasing the incident.
Yes.
It's supposed to be completely gone out of your psyche at that point, which is not to say you'll forget it. You'll still have a memory of the incident happening, but all of the theory is that all the emotional charge and burden of that engram will be gone. It will be dissipated. It will no longer be affecting you as a traumatic episode in your life. That is the point of doing Dianetics. It's not to forget the incident. It's to take off all that emotional charge. And this is why this is the theory of it. This is how Scientologists are told it's supposed to work. So, for example, just not beyond the introspection rundown here, let's say your mom dies, you're very closely connected to your mom, you go into the church and you go, I'm really fucked up about my mom dying, I'm all grief-stricken and it's really messing me up. Oh, well, this is what we should get you. We should get you some Dianetics on losing your mom. And you go in and you relive this thing of losing your mom over and over again. And maybe it goes earlier to past lives. You know, maybe it goes to you lost your dog when you were 5, and then it goes to when you lost your wife, you know, in 1892, and then when it goes to, you know, you lost your son when in 1497, and then, you know, earlier until you no longer have anything there, and then you experience some relief. And now that you've had that session, in real life, you're no longer supposed to be all broken up about your mom dying. You're supposed to be all happy with it. All the trauma and stress is supposed to be gone, and it's no longer supposed to be an emotional burden upon you, even though in real life, it probably still is.
Right.
But you have to tell yourself, you're constantly selling yourself on how, no, it's all good now, you know, I'm all good.
Yeah, because if you show that it didn't work, then it's the emperor's new clothes situation, where you're going to find out that if you really look, you're going to find out you don't have any clothes on. That's
exactly. So it's easier to just have the cognitive dissonance of, okay, well, I still feel like shit about this. I really miss my mom, but I've had the Dianetics and it's supposed to have handled all that. So I'm just going to suppress this emotion that I'm experiencing right now and not really go through the stages of grief and loss and the experience of having to deal with that loss on its own terms and really look at it and deal with it. That's a process, and it takes time and it takes effort. And but not in Scientology. In Scientology, all you got to do is go get that Dianetic session, and it's all supposed to be handled. So that's a whole nother, you know, problem with this.
Okay,
but we'll get back to the introspection rundown now.
Yes, the final set of actions on there, we're just going to go over very, very briefly. Is you're going to be digging in and finding the evil purposes, and then you're going to be running those down with Dianetics. It's kind of complicated to get into. Yeah. Right,
because like for example, how would you? Like, what would be an example of like let's say on this guy with the senior and the introverting thing, and you're going to take this back down because remember, psychosis is supposed to come from an evil purpose. So the idea with this is to actually find what that evil purpose is, and use Dianetics to
run it out,
to erase it, to get rid of that evil purpose, and no longer have it be in your psyche, so to speak.
Yes.
So you could, you could find this thing of my senior introverted me, and you could then run with Dianetics, locate a time when, your senior introverted you, and go back through it and all that. But then you have to find, locate an incident of your causing another to be introverted.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that would turn on the flows. So it goes from you being introverted to you introverting somebody else, and then having to run that out with Dianetics, that you did it to somebody else.
The way they find it is you're going to do a listing and nulling for the intention behind, what would be the intention behind your senior introverting you? That would be your question, and you got to find one item. And your answer could be to ruin me. So now you're going to run to ruin me with Dianetics. Right. Locate a time when you had the intention to ruin me, and then you're going to run that, right? And you're causing another to have the intention to ruin me. Would be, it goes in 4 flows. Everything in Scientology and Dianetics goes in 4 flows. So
right. So again, we're talking about hours of work just to run out one of these purposes. And through the course of the Introspection Rundown, there's tens of these questions to ask and run.
Pages and pages and pages of stuff. Yes.
Yeah, and we're not going to go over all those questions because there's just way too many of them.
Yes.
But the idea, what we're trying to get across here is that you have a progressively tougher series of questions that are being asked and answers demanded that are looking deeper and deeper and deeper into the person's mind to address what Hubbard said is the cause of the psychosis, which is at the bottom of it some kind of evil purposes that the person has in their deep in their psyche that they are, dramatizing and using and being bad antisocial people, and that's why they're psychotic. And that's what you have to do to handle the psychotic, is you gotta find those evil purposes and deal with them.
Yes. Yes, and so, another thing which we touched upon in the beginning of this is anybody who has a psychotic break has a rock slam somewhere. So as the person doing the sessions, I have to find it. Like I'm not digging for it, but I'm watching for it, because I need to be ready to write down exactly what the person is saying when that reaction happens, because you do a whole bunch of other handlings on the words that he says when that meter reaction happens, which could have been him scratching his leg and it made the meter.
Exactly. This response on the meter usually indicates the damn thing's broken.
Yeah.
But you'll just spend all this time working on this thing. I've been, I have this long-awaited, long-promised metering video that I need to do, where I'm going to break all this stuff down and actually show you guys what these meter reads look like. I have talked to a lot of former Scientologists and auditors and case supervisors about this rock slam, this crazy thing that's supposed to indicate an evil purpose. And one for one, every single person I've talked to about it has reported to me that it was probably the meter broken. Is probably what happened, because it can happen in the middle of an auditing session. Some dust can get into the e-meter mechanism, the needle mechanism, or some kind of an electronic circuit break can occur, and the needle can just go bloody insane. And in Scientology, it is, you'll check for a broken meter as the first thing that you do if this shows up on the meter. But that doesn't always necessarily detect. You don't always necessarily detect whether the meter's broken or not just by doing a quick mechanical check. And so people in Scientology have been falsely accused of having evil purposes on something just because the meter broke, and ended up on the RPF or kicked out of Scientology entirely, or kicked out of the Sea Org entirely. Not necessarily a bad thing in the big picture, but for them at the time, it's quite devastating.
Yes.
And all as a result of a broken e-meter. And in the 1970s, I think over 100 people were sent to the RPF when they were renovating Big Blue in LA. And it turned out, they shouldn't have been there, and Hubbard ended up, issuing some amnesty or something. So the rock slam is kind of significant in Scientology, and has consequences.
Yes, it's cousin to a suppressive person. I mean, those two are very closely related. So yes. Yeah. Okay. Obviously, we already had phenomena. I'm going to go over some other stuff.
Do the clear Cannibal step.
Yes, I was going to say. we know the M phenomena of the rundown. We discussed it in the last one, which is, the person is able to look outward or out of a psychotic break. Those are pretty much interchangeable, and that is that signifies the completion of the rundown. In the previous video, I did say, since Lisa McPherson passed away, they don't keep people on property anymore. Hubbard says that we're supposed to send them to the RPF, but I just wanted to make a point that in 1995, when Lisa McPherson passed away, the information about what happened with her was not passed on. I didn't know who Lisa McPherson was. I'd never heard of her until I was at Flag 3 years later, and I saw protesters holding up a coffin, and they had her name, Lisa McPherson, and I could see it over the blinds that were closed. I peeked out and I said, "Who is Lisa McPherson?" That's how I found out who she was. But
Right.
the only thing that we got instructions on, and I'm a case supervisor, so they'll tell you pretty much all the horror they can. But for whatever reason, they never told us her name, probably because Miscavige was involved in it and they didn't want anyone knowing anything about any of it. The only thing that came down to us at that time was do not use melatonin on anybody to help them with their sleep because it makes them psychotic. That's the only instructions I got at that time. They said somebody went psychotic at Flag, and it was the melatonin. And that's it. That was all we were ever told about Lisa McPherson.
The entire lesson learned within the world of Scientology from Lisa McPherson was don't use melatonin.
That's at my level, which is case supervisor. That's
right. No warnings.
No,
don't lock people up. No. Hey,
nothing about the dehydration. Nothing about medical.
Hey, we need to coordinate with the doctors better in the case of nothing about that. No, just all covered up. Didn't happen. Oh, by the way, don't use melatonin.
That's right. They said get rid of all the melatonin in your org. You cannot use it anymore. It makes people psychotic. That's it.
Right. The melatonin makes people psychotic.
Yes.
Great.
That was the
locking them up,
instructions.
not feeding them, not giving them proper medical care. That doesn't make people psychotic.
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted
to
make the note of that. Okay.
Yeah.
The letters.
Okay, yeah,
I'm
let's
not
talk about
smiling.
the
The letters are crazy. I mean.
Yeah. No, this is actually gonna really piss some people off. But it is a part of the rundown. It is something Hubbard said to do.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and go over it.
In the earlier video, we had talked about how he was sending these nice letters to this person, and the guy would rant and rave, and then he'd say, "Well, by the way, what would you like for lunch?" No, the letters are not like that at all. I'm going to read to you what Hubbard. This is from L.Ron Hubbard, founder. The CS, which is the case supervisor action, is a direct comm line to the person by notes. So the case supervisor is writing notes to the psychotic. The person in the psychotic break. The person is provided with paper and pen to reply. The CS must determine the person's responsibility level. For example, "Dear Joe, what can you guarantee me if you were let out of isolation?" In my situation, the case supervisor wasn't writing the notes. I had to write them, but I had to say they were from the case supervisor. The case supervisor wouldn't do these.
When you were actually doing a rundown on somebody, the CS didn't do these?
No, he's supposed to, but he wasn't doing them.
Wow.
On one of them, he wasn't doing them, and he's you know him, Senior CS West US, Andres Rodriguez. He was my CS.
Rodriguez swirled this rundown. Wow, go Andreas.
He would not write the letters. I understand why when I read this. Kudos to him. Maybe he's doubting. I wish.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, he was the one CSing me on this, on one of them, the last one that I did. Okay, if the person's reply shows continued irresponsibility toward other dynamics, do we need to talk about dynamics? We're good?
No, I've done a whole video on the dynamics.
Okay, continued irresponsibility toward other dynamics or fixation on one dynamic to the exclusion of others' damage. The CS must inform the person of his continued isolation and why. For example, and this is in quotes, "Dear Joe, I'm sorry, but no go on coming out of isolation yet. Your actions threaten the survival of hundreds of people indirectly and 6 families directly by burning down their houses. you are unaware of the effects this could have had and only still concerned about your own welfare. You must hate the human race quite a bit, end quote.
So now Scientology takes on the role of
Prison guard.
warden.
Yeah. The case supervisor has drawn a conclusion based on the information he has and lets the person know where he stands. He does not re-introvert the PC by asking him, why did you burn down those houses? He draws an accurate conclusion and indicates it. This will elicit a protest from the person and bring about an involvement in the dynamics concerned. It also serves to bring about an awareness of consequences. For example, but I never meant to threaten others' survival. I just wanted to burn down the houses because I like fires. Gosh, I didn't mean it. I don't hate the human race. Oh, I really don't hate the human race. Cognition. Hubbard says this is a cognition, which means a realization about something. The guy has come out of something. So the person's auditing is continued between these exchanges. The auditor may have to clean up some upsets. I'm changing some words so we don't have to describe them too much. The auditor may have to clean up some upsets as the protest is coming off. When it's skillfully done, all the auditor should have to clean up, except maybe some more contra survival acts, some sins. So you'll pick up upsets and harmful things that the person did to other people.
If you go all the way back to the beginning of the points we were making about what Hubbard says about psychosis, you see that there's an entire attitude here towards a person who has a psychotic break, and that attitude filters through every step of what's being done with them, including these very harsh letters to the person that are supposed to have some kind of shock value and be some kind of tough love circumstance where you're going to, get this person to snap out of their irresponsibility, which you're assuming is the mental state this person has, because you're assuming that the entire reason this whole thing has gone down is because of their evil purposes that they are, spreading, dramatizing, acting out on. And that's the reason for their psychosis. So these fundamental assumptions that Hubbard makes at the beginning of this whole thing spread through this whole rundown. I just want to make that point that's why he feels justified in taking this approach with the person, is because he's made assumptions about why this is going on.
Yes. It says, when it is obvious the person is out of his psychosis and up to the responsibility of living with others, his isolation is ended.
Right.
That's when it's over, and it's going to show in those letters to the CS more than anything.
Wow.
So
okay,
that's how that goes.
So basically what we've laid out here now over the last almost 2 hours, which is, I'm sorry, folks, but that's been necessary to lay all this out. I hope this has been clear, because this is it. This is the introspection rundown. This is how Scientology says to deal with every single person who is straitjacketed in a psychotic episode, having a psychotic break or fit of some kind. One size fits all. This is the action to take. And if you do these steps, Hubbard's bold claim is you will literally cure their psychosis. And one of the biggest contradictions in the real world, I mean, we can sit here and criticize this from our experience and from how ridiculous this is from a critical thinking point of view, but in the real world, Lisa McPherson had this action done on her before this car accident happened, and she stripped down and was then isolated again and run through this, force feeding thing. They never even got to these steps, or very, very barely got into these steps the second time around when they had her locked up and were force feeding her and stuff. This stuff was done on her before all that went down.
Right. And then she relapsed, or there's no cure there. There is no cure there.
That's right. That's the point I'm making. So again, this just goes back to our thesis that Scientologists are the last people you want to be turning somebody over to who's got a mental disorder or an illness of some kind. Because this is not treatment. That's not what this is.
Yes. Okay, a couple of things I wanted to read to conclude, and then that last little section that we have on our notes. I want to go over that. I want to read two things here. One is called the cleared cannibal factor. Cannibal is, a person who eats other people. Cleared cannibal is a very specific thing in Scientology, which is that you can clear a person of their reactive mind, but that doesn't mean they're not going to, if they've lived their entire life and they've eaten people, they're still going to eat people even though they're clear. So that's what a cleared cannibal is when you have a behavior pattern in someone's life and you still, when you make them clear, or what he's referring to here is, he's not saying clear as in no reactive mind. He's, referring to clear loosely as somebody not in a psychotic break. Yep. So a cleared cannibal, even though you've gotten the person out of a psychotic break, you still have a person who has a specific life pattern that hasn't been changed. Yep. So that's what a cleared cannibal is. So when you clear a cannibal, what do you have? Experientially, you have a cannibal. His experiential track is that he has been a cannibal for ages. That's how he's handled life and people around him, and that's what he knows how to do. This person is unaware of his responsibilities to other dynamics and is unfamiliar with proper behavior and responsible actions towards others. In the case of a suppressive person, he has been busy destroying others for so long that when he is somewhat cleaned up on this, he does not know what else to do or how to act. It's rather pathetic, actually. So he's saying here, a person coming out of this state is still going to have all these behavior patterns. He's admitting himself, the rundown really doesn't do anything.
Nope, just supposed to get him out of that introverted state, but there's still, all the reasons they went into that introverted state in the first place are still potentially there.
Yes, as you can see, as witnessed by a relapse from Lisa McPherson. And, in my own heart, I wish I could reach out to the people that I did this rundown on, and I hope they're okay. I would love to be able to help them if there was any way that I could. I don't know if they're okay. I've been excommunicated, so I don't have any way to find out if these people are doing okay, or what happened to them after I completed them on the rundown. They left and they weren't allowed to come back anymore. So I don't know. That's how things are. This person's a threat, quote unquote. Now they're out and they're out living life, or I don't know. I don't know where they are, how they're doing.
Well, I definitely understand exactly how you feel. I've successfully, recommunicated or reconnected with a few people that I, had wronged when I was in the church, and apologized to them. Only one person did not accept my apology, and that's an independent Scientologist, ironically. But anyway, whatever. It's I don't mean whatever I meant towards that guy. I don't mean toward what you just said. It's I totally get how you're feeling. The regret is real.
Tracked down a lot of people and been able to make right with a lot, and there's some that just don't want to. Some won't even talk to me still, but I worry about these ones the most. I really, because this is not, if they did get something out of it, more power to them. If they felt like they gained something from it, that's okay too. But I would like to see how they are, I guess.
Yeah, I totally get it.
So this final bold statement from Hubbard, I wanted to say, if I could.
Yes, please, go ahead.
You have in your hands the tool to take over mental therapy in full. You need not fear the insane or the psychotic break any longer.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned here, psychiatry and psychology, in case it's not clear, we know they don't have all the answers. We definitely get that. This is a field of development and research, and is barely, as we've said before, barely out of the dark ages in so many ways. What we're trying to demonstrate here is that Scientology has negative productivity and answers in this area. They are completely, wholly, and totally unqualified to be dealing with people who have real mental illness or disorders, and they should not be being turned to for that. That is not to say that turning to a psychiatrist or a psychologist is always going to give you the solution that you're looking for, because it's just not a well-developed field yet. We're still got so much work to do. And between neurology and psychiatry and psychology and sociology, you know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of work to try to figure this stuff out. It is not that nothing's being done. It's just they got to figure stuff out. And so Scientology attempts to take advantage of that, you know, undone work and mistakes that have been made in the past in psychiatry, and there have been some big ones, some real whoppers. Scientology attempts to take advantage of those to offer itself as a solution, and it's not a solution. It's just not,
Right.
you know.
Hubbard tries to say that he's got the solution for all mental illnesses, and I hope we have shown in these 3 video series that here I am, I'm a highly trained, you know, I've got all my stamps. They told me I can do this stuff. Even the issue that excommunicates me has an entire paragraph about what a great technical person I was. I wasn't kicked out for anything to do with any of this Scientology technology stuff. It has nothing to do with how I ended up out. But, you know, they even on my final, you're a suppressive person, it says right in there, I'm a great technical terminal. It says it right in there. Maybe I should show you that. But
at least you got your
all
SP declare. I didn't even get mine.
And I've got all the stamps, and they've trusted me enough. You know, Hubbard says, you know, only the best auditors can be doing this rundown. And I'm telling you, from my position, I do not feel like I thought I was at the time, but I would not touch anyone with this rundown. Never. Because I don't feel like this is the answer for anything. So I guess that's my apology. It's my apology for doing this, I guess. I mean, I'm happy if people actually did get something out of it. But I feel like I've overstepped my bounds, and so has Hubbard. So yeah. I just wanted to make that clear.
Cool. Definitely. And I think people will get the gist of what you're talking about here.
Okay.
All right, Sunny. Well, thank you very much for, again, taking the time to go over all this. For those of you who have been watching here, and you've probably been watching in chunks because this is a pretty long video, much longer than usual. But we needed to be thorough about this. We knew that, you know, we said this is what we were going to do, and we hope that this has shed a lot of light on what Scientology is actually about versus their PR glossy statements about how wonderful it all is and how easy it is to deal with people who have problems. It is not easy. It is complicated and messy and sometimes a sordid mess, you know, and that's the reality of things outside of Scientology's little bubble world. So thank you very much for watching all of this and listening to everything we had to say. Leave any questions, comments, or feedback in the comment section here on YouTube. I'd be very interested in what you guys have to say, and we will look at those and respond. And if there's some, you know, really big stuff that we have missed, or there's more to this subject matter that we need to discuss, we will do more videos about that in the future. So again, thanks for coming around, and we'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.